Coming up in our newscast tonight. Seoul's top new convoy Lee Do-hoon travels to Washington to meet his U.S. counterpart. The duo will focus on North Korea's denuclearization and fine-tune details of a new working group. South Koreans are likely to be soon able to visit North Korea's Geumgang-san Mountain in the near future. That's coming from the chair of Hyundai Group, who expresses confidence in the resumption of tours from South Korea. South Korea has found 5 sets of war remains at Arrowhead Hill in the demilitarized zone while clearing out landmines in the area. That makes a total of 9 sets recovered to date. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Amid the backdrop of news of North Korea's continued developments of weapons and the discovery of undeclared missile base, a very important meeting is set to take place. Seoul and Washington's nuclear envoys will sit down for talks this week. Let's start things off with the latest diplomatic efforts to re-engage the regime on its pledge to denuclearize. Lee Ji-won has our top story.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy departed for the U.S. on Monday as Seoul and Washington aim to further align their cooperation on North Korea. Lee Do-hoon, Seoul's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, will be in Washington for 3 days for meetings with his U.S. counterpart Stephen Biegun, Washington's special representative for North Korea. While discussions on North Korea's denuclearization and developments on the Korean Peninsula will be key agendas, the two diplomats are also planning to fine-tune details of their new working group, announced after their last meeting in Seoul a month ago. And as there are expectations the working group's first meeting is likely to take place while Lee is there, officials from the National Security Office and the Unification Ministry are known to have joined him on the trip.
After thrashing out the details one last time during this visit, we might hold the first meeting, so there's a certain process we have to go through before I can tally the agenda. Our cooperation worked just fine before, but now we are seeking to make it even more systematic to cover a much wider range of issues.
Asked if high-level talks between Pyongyang and Washington will be held at the end of this month, Lee said that will also be discussed. The two sides are also expected to talk about the groundbreaking ceremony for linking and modernizing inter-Korean railways and roads. The working group is set to focus on cooperation in diplomacy, denuclearization efforts, the implementation of UN sanctions, and ways in which the two Koreas can work together within the framework of such sanctions. As much as Lee's visit comes after growing tension between Pyongyang and Washington over reports on North Korea's undeclared missile bases and its leader's visit to the testing of a new high-tech weapon, there are hopes the stalled denuclearization talks with North Korea may soon resume. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea will make the necessary preparations for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul, something that was agreed at the September summit in Pyongyang. The nation's Unification Ministry spokesperson Baek Tae-hyun said during a regular briefing on Monday that despite the stalled nuclear negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington, Seoul will continue to work to implement the agreements made by the two Koreas, including Kim's visit within the year. He also expressed hope for progress in denuclearization talks to speed up the peace process on the peninsula. South Korea discovered 5 more sets of war remains in the DMZ while clearing out landmines. They were found at Arrowhead Hill or Hwasalmori-goji, the site of one of the fiercest battles during the Korean War. Seoul's Defense Ministry announced today the remains will be examined in detail and put through DNA analysis. The area was jointly designated by the two Koreas for a pilot project set to be carried out next year to look for remains of fallen soldiers. Work to remove mines has been underway since early October. So far, altogether 9 sets of remains have been found in that area. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff once again refused to confirm what type of weapon was tested by Pyongyang last week. During a regular press briefing this morning, the spokesperson for the JCS explained it is not appropriate for the military to give an official confirmation on the type of weapon tested. Colonel No Jae-chun added military authorities from Seoul and Washington are jointly analyzing the matter. The North Korean Central News Agency reported last Friday that the regime successfully tested a new high-tech weapon under the supervision of its leader Kim Jong-un. Japan's Asahi Shimbun reported the test was a simulation of surface-to-ship guided missile. A group of over 100 South Koreans who visited North Korea's Mount Kumgang-san to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the launch of South Korean tours there has returned home today. The chair of Hyundai Group, which spearheaded major inter-Korean projects, including the tours to that mountain, says she expects the program to resume in the near future. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
It'll be difficult to resume tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang-san this year, but they will start soon. That's coming from the chair of Hyundai Group, who returned from a two-day trip to the mountain on Monday after celebrating the 20th anniversary of tours there for South Korean civilians.
In August, I brought you a message of hope that tours to Mount Geumgang-san could start within this year. At this point, however, that seems unlikely, but I believe they will restart in the near future.
Hyundai ASEAN spearheaded major inter-Korean projects, both the tours to Mount Kumgang-san and the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The mountain tours stopped, though, after a South Korean tourist was shot dead in 2008. It's been a decade since the tours came to a halt, but over 100 South Koreans, including Hyundai officials, South Korea's lawmakers, and former unification ministers, visited the mountain from Sunday to Monday to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the tour program. From the North Korean side, around 80 officials from Pyongyang's Asia-Pacific Committee and 500 ordinary citizens.
The vice chairman of North Korea's Asia-Pacific Committee said he's very happy that the celebration was so grand and successful, and expressed his wish that the tours resume soon. He proposed that his committee and Hyundai join forces to smoothly carry out inter-Korean projects.
The Hyundai chair said she could see that the North Korean officials want to resume the tours as soon as possible, but they had no detailed discussions about inter-Korean economic cooperation. She added that preparations are underway at Hyundai so the tours can start as soon as international sanctions on the regime are lifted. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in wrapped up his two-nation tour that took him to Singapore and Papua New Guinea. Let's take a look back at who the South Korean leader met during a series of multilateral forums and what he accomplished during the trip. Here's Shin Se-min.
At the APEC summit in Papua New Guinea, President Moon Jae-in proposed a joint project called the Digital Innovation Fund, aimed at fostering the Pacific Rim's digital capabilities. He put forward his administration's economic and social policies as an exemplary case for APEC's common goal of inclusive growth. The South Korean leader also reaffirmed his resolve to play a part in advancing sustainable growth in the region. President Moon pressed ASEAN and Pacific Rim nations deemed relatively aloof when it comes to efforts to denuclearize North Korea to give him guarantees that they'll play their role ensuring the regime makes progress on its commitment to abandon its nuclear weapons. On the sidelines of the summits in Singapore and Papua New Guinea, President Moon held bilateral meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, and Chinese President Xi Jinping. North Korea was a key topic, especially as talks between Pyongyang and Washington seemed to have hit a deadlock. Presidents Moon and Putin agreed on the need for reciprocal measures from the U.S. and others if the Kim Jong-un regime makes progress on denuclearization. President Moon and Vice President Pence reaffirmed the talks between Pyongyang and Washington are progressing well, and that Pence requested the South Korean leader to engage in closer communications with the Kim Jong-un regime. At the summit between Presidents Moon and Xi, the leaders both saw the second North Korea-U.S. summit and a planned reciprocal visit to Seoul by leader Kim as crucial in resolving the denuclearization issue. The only other leader from the region that President Moon did not meet with was Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. This may have been due to the recent downturn in relations since Tokyo's angry response to South Korea's Supreme Court ruling in favor of the Korean victims of Japan's wartime system of forcing Koreans to work in Japanese factories. Still, with the majority of the key players sharing the common desire to keep the peace drive going, it seems the negotiations for a second North Korea-US summit will finally get some traction. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in said Seoul and Tokyo can become trusting friends only when they pursue justice and principles by understanding each other's points of view. That's part of a congratulatory message sent to mark the opening of the Joint General Assembly of the South Korea-Japan Cooperation Committee, a nonpartisan group of lawmakers and business leaders from both countries. In his message, the president pointed out Japan's 35 years as the colonial ruler of the Korean peninsula is a painful memory for both countries, but emphasized that both must, quote, face the truth for the sake of sustainable and sound relations. Tension between Seoul and Tokyo have intensified since last month when the South Korean Supreme Court ruled a Japanese steelmaker has to pay nearly $88,000 each to 4 Koreans who were forced to work at a steel mill belonging to his predecessor during World War II. It seems highly unlikely the government's 2019 budget will be passed on time. Rival parties failed to narrow their differences to normalize parliament, which is delaying the deliberation of the spending plan. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
The National Assembly has been deadlocked since last week, preventing any progress on the government's proposed budget for 2019, worth roughly $420 billion. Rival parties are at odds over whether to launch a parliamentary probe into a hiring scandal at a public subway operator, as well as demands from the opposition for the president to fire his senior aide for civil affairs for his poor vetting of a candidate for a minister post. Despite a meeting Monday aimed at finding a breakthrough, rival parties only reaffirmed their differences. The ruling party says the opposition is making unreasonable demands.
We are not saying that we oppose the probe. The state audit agency is conducting its own inspection into the hiring favors and will thoroughly uncover the truth. Wouldn't it be more productive to open a wider probe once that investigation is finished? It's more urgent right now to deal with next year's budget and bills related to people's livelihoods.
The two biggest opposition parties already boycotted a plenary meeting last week, in which they had agreed to pass pending bills related to people's livelihoods. They claim the ruling party thinks time is on their side, since the government's plan will be automatically put up for a vote, should the parties fail to deliberate on the bill before the legal deadline.
If the ruling party doesn't cooperate on holding a parliamentary probe, we can only see it as trying to pass the budget plan without going through parliament.
We condemn the ruling party for ignoring the demands of the opposition. Until they change, we regret to say that it will be hard to get Parliament running like normal.
The gridlock has also delayed the setting up of a budget subcommittee, which will make specific cuts or increases to the spending plan. For now, the floor leaders of the rival parties say they will meet on a regular basis to look for common ground. But prospects appear dim that they'll have the bill ready on time, with just 2 weeks before the legal deadline. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Seoul's Prime Minister attended an event today to promote Korea's mid-sized company. It was hosted by the Association of High Potential Enterprises of Korea, and the slogan was being responsible for innovative growth and job creation. The PM thanked the companies for their contributions in those areas. Cha Sang-mi shares with us his remarks.
South Korean Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun congratulated the nation's mid-sized firms on their contributions to job creation, the government's main agenda. He noted that they've not been given the spotlight on that front despite their efforts. It was the 4th edition of this annual event to promote mid-sized companies. And in his address, the PM said South Korea has gone through a lot this year, both domestically and internationally.
We have endured the U.S.-China trade dispute, the rate hike in the United States, financial instability in emerging markets, spending to cope with the aging of our society and shrinking employment.
But he also pointed to bright spots. The nation's exports and trade volume are both likely to break a record this year. And he thanked the mid-sized enterprises for what he said was an immense contribution to society.
Consumption is recovering. The nation's shipbuilding, which has suffered for years, is now increasing. Employment has fallen, but among the new jobs created by public companies, more than half were created by mid-sized firms. Thank you.
The PM underscored the plight of mid-sized firms, which have always faced high expectations from society, and he vowed to do his best to help them run their businesses more easily.
The government has allocated $16 billion next year for industries. That's an increase of 14.7%. We will expand our support, especially for the manufacturing sector. We will announce new policies that reinvigorate major industries like automobiles and shipbuilding by the end of this year.
The PM also celebrated an increase in the number of venture companies, with sales worth over 100 billion Korean won, or around $88 million. 69 companies were added to their ranks this year, for a total of 572. He asked the leaders of the mid-sized companies to help these venture firms grow too. 차상미, Arirang News.
The nation's central banker emphasized the need for countries in the Asia-Pacific to strengthen their economic resilience. At a joint conference organized by the Bank of Korea and the Bank of International Settlements, Lee Ju-yeol pointed out increasing economic resilience in the region is important to prevent sudden foreign capital outflows, mostly in the form of bonds, from causing systematic risks. The BOK governor highlighted that the U.S. rate hikes and escalating Washington-Beijing trade spat triggered capital outflows and financial volatility in several emerging markets, and added it's important to strengthen overall economic resilience through improving current accounts and increasing foreign reserves. In 2007, the South Korean government enforced a law to prevent companies from abusing non-regular workers. It was designed to protect fixed-term employees and workers dispatched by agencies. But some say the move was counterproductive. Our Ko Ryuni takes a closer look.
The law limiting companies' use of non-regular workers, including fixed-term employees and workers employed through an agency, has increased the number of regular workers, but it has also led to a decrease in the total number of workers and led to more subcontracted workers who fall into categories not covered by the law. This is according to a report released on Monday by the Korea Development Institute, a state-run think tank. The report compared how more than 5,800 companies hired employees in 2005 and after 2007, when the government enforced a law to prevent the abuse of non-regular workers. The law included measures to protect non-regular workers by, for example, mandating that after a certain time period, companies had to change the status of temporary workers to permanent workers. The Korea Development Institute says this law actually decreased the total employment size. They also found out that companies hired more people not protected by the law, including contract workers.
We can divide the total workers into three categories: regular workers, non-regular workers protected by the law, and non-regular workers unprotected by the law. It's like pushing the middle part of a balloon. As the South Korean government decreased the number of non-regular workers protected by the law, workers in other two categories increased.
The researcher says a lot of effort is needed to prevent the abuse of non-regular workers, but the law has some limits. Therefore, the researcher says it is more important to think about what companies need in order to lessen their burden when transitioning from non-regular workers to regular ones.
For companies to change non-regular workers to regular ones, a lot more flexibility is needed in working conditions for regular workers. Looser limits on work hours is one of many examples.
Ko Ryuni, Arirang News.
South Korea has launched an arms export promotion center to help domestic defense firms branch out to overseas markets. The opening ceremony of DexPro, or Defense Export Promotion Center, was held today at its headquarters in Gwacheon, just south of Seoul. The event was attended by the chiefs of the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, Wang Jang-hong, along with other key senior officials from the Ministry of National Defense, the Foreign Ministry, and major defense firms. The center aims to provide comprehensive support to local defense firms to streamline administrative procedures for exports and to strengthen networks among South Korean embassies, military attachés, and trade promotion officials located in foreign countries. Starting December, drones will deliver automated external defibrillators, in case of emergencies inside national parks. The so-called ambulance drones can save lives by reaching those having heart attacks in the mountains within the golden time. When there is a report of an emergency, these machines can use GPS to deliver the emergency equipment. National parks will also begin using patrol drones that can make warning announcements if they monitor illegal activities such as trash dumping. The patrol drone can use their thermal imaging cameras and searchlights to prevent accidents. The ambulance drones will first be used on Geumgang-san Mountain and the patrol drones in Taeanhean, Hanlyeohaesang, and Byeonsan-Bando National Parks. The South Korean men's fencing team continued to display their dominance at the first international tournament of the new season. Their latest feat comes a day after Ha Han-sol claimed victory in the individual saber event at the International Fencing Federation's World Cup in Algiers. Ha and three teammates added another gold in the team competition with a 45-31 win over Russia on Sunday. Seoul is ranked #1 in the world. Their winning streak since golden performances at the Asian Games in August is kept alive. South Korea is one of the world's leading economies and tech hubs today, but go back several decades and you will be astonished at how far the nation has come since those turbulent years and how quickly it's grown. A special photo exhibition is now on to help you take a trip back in time. Seung takes us there.
This photo was taken during the June democracy movement in 1987. More than 30 years ago, South Koreans held huge protests demanding direct presidential elections and greater civil liberties. The picture shows a university student who died after being hit by a tear gas bomb fired by the authorities. The incident sparked a wave of anti-government sentiment in the country. One photo publisher in Korea is holding its 30th photo exhibition. The art fair introduces various aspects of South Korea from the 1940s to the present day, including societal, cultural, and political features to show the nation's history to the current and future generations in the form of photography.
South Korea achieved remarkable economic growth in a short period of time, but during the process we lost traditions and historical lessons we should not forget. So my team has been publishing photos to encourage future generations to remember what the country was like.
Over the last 3 decades, this publisher has printed nearly 700 photo books, shedding light on every aspect of South Korea's positive and negative sides. These pictures reflect the lives of ordinary people over the years. In the 70s, this bus had an assistant collecting fares and jamming passengers inside. A mail delivery man brings a letter to curious children in one of Korea's remote rural areas. Some of the pictures were taken by American officials dispatched to the South several decades ago. The color pictures were taken by unknown U.S. officials and servicemen mostly in Seoul since around the time of New Year's Day in 1948. It shows Seoul before it was destroyed during the Korean War and children playfully enjoying the new year.
Korea's history and identity can be presented in written form, but I think photography is a wonderful way to show the country's unique culture and identity in a visual way.
He added that instead of just focusing on Korea's strengths, Koreans need to embrace all of the nation's history, including aspects they would rather forget. He says it can help future generations avoid the mistakes of the past and be thankful for what they have today. Seung, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you'll need. Michelle, seems like the air is finally dust-free somewhat.
That's right, Daniel. Most regions highlighted in green on the map are enjoying this nice, good air quality, whereas the central region will continue to be blanketed in ultrafine dust for some more hours as a cold front is expected to sweep off the remaining dust tonight. And by tomorrow morning, the whole country will be under a clear and sunny sky, while Beijing will stay cloudy and Pyongyang will receive some drizzles in the afternoon. Now, cold winds will dominate the forecast tonight, dropping temperatures in some regions into negative territory. Seoul will start off the day with 0 degrees Celsius tomorrow, Chuncheon at -3, while Busan and Jeju will still make it up into the warm side. And sunny spells will bring up the highs tomorrow, Seoul rising up to 12 degrees, Daegu and Gyeongju topping out to 14. And the central region is expected to get some rain over on Wednesday and the southern regions over on Thursday. And after this rain, the mercury will pretty much get fixed into single-digit readings. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you in tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.